There are mornings when I wake up and don't know why I exist. The small damp room, with light filtering through the narrow window, is not enough to dispel the cold feeling in my heart. Each tick of the wall clock reminds me that another day is passing, and I am still here, invisible in a vast world. Once I had friends, family, lively conversations, but then, one by one, the connections broke. Not because of a single event, but because of a series of misunderstandings, arguments, and distances that grew over time. I don't blame anyone in particular, but the feeling of being left behind is still there, weighing heavily. My phone used to ring constantly, messages, calls, invitations to coffee. Now the screen only lights up with ads or bill reminders. I've started to dread turning it on because each time I do, it's a reminder. No one needs me. I've tried reaching out to a few people, but the indifferent responses or lack of replies only made me more silent. On weekend afternoons, when the cafes are filled with laughter, I often wander alone. It feels like I'm standing on the sidelines of a big party without a ticket to enter. On social media, I see familiar faces still laughing, still gathering, but there's no place for me in those photos. Every time I scroll past, my heart feels like it's being squeezed. One day I called home just to hear my mother's voice, but the conversation didn't last long. We exchanged a few polite words and ended with awkward silence. I know my mother loves me, but the distance between us is too great, not just geographically, but the gap of misunderstanding. Nighttime is the hardest. I lie in the darkness, listening to the rain falling outside the window. The room feels like it's shrinking, and I feel like the whole world has forgotten me. No one knocks on the door, no one asks how I am, no one waits for me to come home. Loneliness isn't just about being alone. It's like a thick fog clinging to my skin, making it hard to breathe. I try to tell myself that I'm strong, that I don't need anyone to survive. But deep down, I long for a hug, a kind word, a glance that shows I still matter. The world outside keeps spinning, still vibrant, while I feel like a piece of a puzzle left behind, lying on the floor, unnoticed. The days of being abandoned are not noisy or dramatic. They just quietly gnaw away at every bit of hope, every bit of faith, until I realize I can't remember the last time I truly laughed. There are pains that cannot be named, only felt through a heavy heartbeat and tearful eyes in the middle of the night. I have become an expert at hiding my emotions. During the day, I still smile, nod, and say I'm fine when someone asks. But behind that mask, my soul is like an unhealed wound, bleeding at the slightest touch. I remember the times I was alone in the bathroom, turning the water on full blast to drown out my sobs. The hot water flowed over my face, mingling with the salty tears. No one knew, and I don't want anyone to know. I'm afraid of pitying eyes, afraid of questions that I don't know how to answer. There are days when I walk out with a forced smile. I can still make jokes, I can still say a few funny things, but inside I'm empty. It's easier to smile at others than to explain how much pain I'm in. People only see the mask and think I'm fine. As for me, I bury that truth so deeply that I myself begin to doubt my own feelings. Night is the cruelest time. When the city falls silent, loneliness seems to magnify all wounds. I lie in bed looking up at the ceiling and wondering if anyone ever thinks of me. The ticking of the clock rings again, stretching each minute into an endless time. I have no more tears to cry every day, but in my heart it still feels like there is a rain that never stops. The irony is that sometimes I wish someone would notice the tiredness behind my smile, but when someone asks, "Are you okay?" my reflex is still, "Yeah, I'm fine." I know I've just closed another door between myself and others. I want to be understood, but I'm afraid of being judged. I want to be hugged, but I retreat before anyone can get close. The pain comes not only from being abandoned, but also from pretending to be okay. Pretending to be strong is much more tiring than admitting to being weak. But I've gotten used to it, like a suit of armor that I wear all day, both protecting and suffocating me. If someone had looked deeply into my eyes at that moment, they would have seen a rolling ocean. But most people just walked by, smiled, and continued on their way. So I continued my role, silently wrapping up my pain in the silence between my smiles. I used to believe that I didn't deserve to be loved. That feeling didn't appear in a moment, but silently accumulated over many years, like a wound that was left unattended, with no one to bandage it. Back then, everything started with seemingly harmless words. You're not good at anything. No one wants you. At first, I thought they were just saying it in anger, but then those words repeated over and over, seeping into my mind like small needles, stabbing me little by little. I didn't realize it, but I started to believe those words. Believe that my value was only as good as what I could do, and when I failed, I was worthless. I remember one time when I needed someone to be by my side, I turned to a close friend, but instead of listening, he just said, "You're too negative. I feel tired when I'm around you." At that time, I smiled and said, "It's okay," but inside, a piece of my heart broke. From then on, I learned to be silent. I hid my sadness as deep as I could, afraid that if anyone saw it, they would turn away and leave. Being misunderstood by my family was painful. Being shunned by my friends made me believe that the problem was with me. I asked myself, am I so bad that everyone leaves me? And the answer in my head was always yes. From then on, I built a high wall around myself. Inside the wall, I was safe from criticism, but also suffocatingly lonely. During sleepless nights, I often reminisce about the past, like rewinding a sad movie. I see myself sitting in a corner of the schoolyard that year when my friends were playing and not calling my name. I see myself standing in front of the living room door, listening to my parents arguing and then hearing my name being dragged in as a cause. I see myself in the present, an adult on the outside but still a trembling child on the inside, just waiting for someone to hug me and say, "I'm fine, I'm still loved." But that never happened, at least not yet. And because it didn't happen, I believed even more that I didn't deserve it. That belief took root, became a part of me, making all the compliments that came after me seem strange, unable to touch my heart. Perhaps the wound in my heart wasn't just about being abandoned, but about abandoning myself. I stopped believing, stopped opening up, stopped allowing myself to be loved. And that pushed me into a darkness deeper than ever. There were long nights that seemed to never end. I sat by the window, looking at the dim yellow lights outside, and felt like I was floating in a cold ocean. The feeling of loneliness at that time was not just having no one by my side, but an emptiness so great that every sound, every breath, every reason to live became distant. That day I was exhausted. Both my body and mind felt like they were being sucked into the bottom. I remember thinking, if I disappeared now, no one would notice. That thought did not come out suddenly, but had been simmering for a long time, just waiting for a moment of weakness to surface. I walked to the small table, where a few pills were in a glass bottle. My trembling hand touched the bottle's lid. My heart felt heavy as if it was being pressed by a rock. Every image in my head became blurred, leaving only the feeling of wanting to let go of everything. No more blaming anyone, no more anger, only a tiredness so great that all hope seemed meaningless. My trembling hand touched the bottle's lid. My heart felt heavy as if it was being pressed by a rock. Every image in my head became blurred, leaving only the feeling of wanting to let go of everything. No more blaming anyone, no more anger, only a tiredness so great that all hope seemed meaningless. But at that moment, in the thick silence, I heard something strange. Not a real voice, but clearer than any other. "Wait a little longer." I stood still. My heart was pounding. It wasn't my thought, at least I believed it was, because I didn't want to wait for anything anymore. But that voice or that whisper had a strange warmth, as if someone was holding me back before it was too late. I put the bottle down on the table. Tears suddenly welled up, not violently, but just silently. I didn't know why I was crying, nor where the call came from, but I knew I had just narrowly escaped the brink. That night, I lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The call, "Wait a little longer," still echoed in my mind. It didn't solve all the problems, it didn't dispel the darkness, but it planted a seed, small but enough to keep me from giving up. Maybe somewhere, there is still a reason for me to live, and maybe one day I will know what that reason is. A few days after the night I heard the whisper, Wait a little longer. I still couldn't find an explanation. Everything inside me was still a mess, but at least I was still here. That day the phone rang. It was an old friend whom I hadn't seen for many years. We had gone to high school together, but after each of us went our separate ways, the distance between us grew farther and farther. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up the phone. "Hello, it's been a long time." His voice rang out, warm and a little hesitant. We exchanged a few casual greetings. But then he suddenly said, "For some reason, I feel like I have to see you soon. Are you free this week? How about going to church with me tomorrow?" If it were before, I would have found a reason to decline immediately. I wasn't interested in religion, and I didn't want to go to a crowded place in a depressed state. But for some reason, my mouth blurted out, "Yeah, tomorrow is fine." The next morning, I almost wanted to withdraw my agreement. But politeness, or some invisible attraction, made me still step out of the house. We met in front of a small building with an old but neat sign, Protestant Church, hanging above it. As soon as the door opened, I heard singing coming from inside. A small band was playing, and the whole hall was singing. The melody wasn't too elaborate, but there was something about the lyrics that stopped me in my tracks. "Come to the Father, He loves you forever." I don't know why, but those words made my heart sink. I felt my eyes blur, a feeling both strange and familiar. None of them knew who I was, but I felt like I had just entered a place where I belonged. My friend smiled, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Welcome." I didn't know if this was just a chance meeting or part of something bigger, but deep down, I had a hunch that this would be the beginning of a journey I never dared to dream of. That morning, after the worship service, everyone sat down. A middle-aged man, the pastor of the church, stepped up to the podium. His voice was deep but gentle, without any pretension or attempt to impress. He told me about his darkest days when he felt like life was worthless, and then he found faith in God. He said something that almost took my breath away. "You are loved even when you feel worthless." I couldn't remember hearing anything like that before, but this time it was like an arrow piercing my heart. All the layers of hardness I had worn for so long, the fake smiles, the fake "I'm fines," suddenly cracked. I blinked hard to keep from crying in the crowd, but failed. The first tear fell after months of emotional exhaustion. It was not from sadness, but from the feeling of being touched, seen, understood, even by someone I had never seen. When the service ended, everyone bowed their heads in prayer. I didn't know what to do. I had never prayed before, but in the silence I heard myself whisper, my voice trembling, "God, if you are real, please don't leave me." It wasn't a perfect prayer. There were no fancy words, no formalities, just a cry from a heart that was exhausted but still wanted to be saved. I didn't see the miracle right away. There was no flash of light, no clap of thunder, but I felt an indescribable tenderness, as if someone were quietly embracing me. In that moment, I knew I had done something important, even if I didn't fully understand the meaning. On the way back, I wasn't sure what the future would bring, but at least I had started talking to him, and maybe he was listening too. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had slept well. In fact, I had been tossing and turning all night, but there was a strange urge to breathe in the morning air. I opened the window, and a cool breeze rushed in, carrying the faint scent of milk flowers from the street next door. I realized it had been a long time since I had truly paid attention to the scent of the morning. Usually, I would just hastily close the door, hiding from the outside world. But today, with just a gust of wind, I felt my heart calm down. The feeling wasn't like a loud joy, but a smoldering peace, spreading little by little. It didn't erase all my worries. It didn't change my circumstances instantly, but it was like someone had placed a small candle in my heart, enough to temporarily dispel the thick darkness. I remembered yesterday's awkward prayer. "God, if you exist, please don't leave me." And I wondered, was he answering with this peace? I wasn't sure, but I wanted to believe it. That day, I faced the same difficulties, deadlocked work, strained family relationships, but my mind was not as heavy as before. I didn't have to force myself to try to be happy. I simply felt calmer. That evening, as I lay down, I whispered another prayer, short but hopeful. Thank you for today. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but please be with me. And I fell asleep, not in despair, but in the arms of a budding faith. I don't know what prompted me, but a few days later I searched the internet for the phrase, "How can I know God?" A series of results appeared, sermons, real-life stories, even online Bibles. I sat staring at the screen for a long time, feeling like I was about to enter a completely foreign land. I had never been a religious person. In my mind, the Bible was something both distant and difficult to understand. But that day, for some reason, I clicked on the link, the Gospel of John. The words appeared before my eyes. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. I read it 3, 4 times. Each word pierced the deepest part of my wound. All my life I had felt that I had to be worthy to be loved, that I had to be perfect to not be abandoned. Yet here it was, that there was someone who loved me before I even tried. I kept reading, stories of people who were weak, failed, even despised, but God found them, called them by name, and changed their lives. I realized that I saw myself in them, not strong, not brilliant, just broken. Another sentence made me cry. While we were still weak, Christ died for us. Romans 5:6. I didn't understand all the theology or doctrine, but I did understand this. He knew I was weak, and he didn't turn his back. That day, I wrote down 3 things in my notebook. Someone loved me unconditionally. I found hope in the pages of ancient books. There was still room in my heart to believe. I closed my computer, but the words kept ringing in my head. You are loved. And for the first time, I believed that might be true. For years, I lived like a fugitive, not from a specific place, but from my own memories. Every time a certain image or sound came up, I immediately avoided the past. I was afraid to remember, afraid that the pain and humiliation would swallow me up. But then, when I began to learn about God, I realized to be truly healed, I could not keep the door to the past closed. Like a wound that has been covered for too long, it will not heal but fester. To heal, I had to open it up, let the light and air in, even though it would be very painful at first. I started to write a diary. Each page was a part of the memory that I had wanted to forget. I wrote about the feeling of abandonment, the times I was ignored, the words that hurt me to the core. Writing made me tremble, but each word was like pulling out a thorn from my heart. I faced not only the pain, but also the anger. I realized that I had blamed many people, and myself. That smoldering anger was like a red-hot coal, not bursting into fire, but still burning silently inside. I began to bring it all into prayer, telling God everything. I'm so angry with them. I hate this feeling. I don't want to forgive, but please help me. The strange thing is that when I dared to be honest with God, I was not condemned. I felt him listening, patiently, like a father sitting next to a child who is expressing all his grievances. Forgiveness, just 2 words, but they weighed like a stone. For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant letting go, pretending that I had never been hurt, and it was so unfair. They had turned their backs on me when I needed them most. Why should I forgive them? But then, as I read the Bible, I came across Jesus' words. Forgive those who wrong you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. At first, that seemed like too much to ask. I wasn't ready. Every time I thought of them, my heart still clenched, and the memories of abandonment came back like a knife. I began to pray, not with immediate forgiveness, but with a confession. God, I don't want to forgive, but if you do, help me learn how. Forgiveness turned out to be a process, not a moment. Every day I laid my bitterness before God. Every time a bad memory came back, I took a deep breath and said, I choose not to harbor this. It didn't always work. Some days I still cried, some days I still got angry, but I persevered. Then one day when I thought back to those who had abandoned me, I suddenly realized that I no longer felt the desire to retaliate or blame. Instead, there was a gentle sadness and even compassion. Maybe they were hurt too, had their own limitations and fears. Forgiveness did not change the past, but it changed me. It cut the cord that bound me to bitterness. I no longer had to carry that burden every day. And it was in letting go that I truly felt freedom, a huge void in my heart, now filled with peace. If forgiving others is hard, forgiving myself is even harder. For many years, I lived with guilt like a backpack full of rocks. Each rock was a self-reproach. You're so weak. You should have tried harder. You ruined everything. Those words rang out every night before I went to sleep, and they were also the things that woke me up tired. Even though others forgave me, even though circumstances had changed, I could not stop condemning myself. But then, through the pages of the Bible, I came across this promise. If anyone is in Christ, the old debt is canceled, and all things become new. I had read that verse many times, but this time, it was like an arrow piercing the thick wall I had built around my heart. I realized I was keeping myself in a prison that God had opened long ago. He had forgiven me, but I was still trying to stay inside, as if the punishment was something I deserved forever. That night, I knelt down, and instead of asking for forgiveness like I usually did, I said, God, I choose to believe that you have forgiven me. Please help me forgive myself. Forgiving myself is not about justifying my mistakes, but about accepting that I am human, weak, limited, and still worthy of love. It was like taking one stone off a backpack. At first, my back ached from the habit of carrying a heavy load, but with each step, it felt lighter. The day I truly looked in the mirror and saw no more accusing eyes, I knew I had turned a new page. I was no longer living to pay for the past, but to live to continue writing my story with the freedom and hope that God had given me. In the morning, instead of pulling the covers over my head, I opened the window. The sunlight filtered through the curtains onto my desk, making the room unusually warm. I made myself a cup of tea, sat listening to the birds on the porch. Those seemingly ordinary sounds and images, which I had rarely paid attention to before, now became reasons to smile. I started writing a gratitude journal, just a few lines a day, but each word was like a brick to rebuild the house of my soul. Today I am grateful for the blue sky. Yesterday I was grateful for a text message asking how I was doing. Tomorrow I might be grateful for the smell of fresh bread from the corner store. I also learned to open up to others. At first it was just chatting with a familiar salesgirl, then texting a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. Each restored connection was a golden thread sewing the torn fabric of my life. Of course, there are still days when the gray clouds come, but unlike before, I am no longer swallowed by them. I know that I can find a ray of light, no matter how small, to hold on to. A short prayer, a soft song, or simply stepping out onto the balcony to take a deep breath. These things help me remember that the darkness is never all. That day, I was in the most difficult financial period. My job was temporarily interrupted, bills were piling up, and I didn't know how to make ends meet. All day I tried to stay calm, but inside I was a storm of anxiety. At night, I knelt down and prayed, not with elaborate sentences, but simply with a plea. God, I'm so tired. If you're really here, please help me know I'm not alone. The next day, while sitting in the park trying to find some peace, I received a text message from a friend I hadn't heard from for more than 2 years. He asked how I was doing and suddenly said he wanted to send me some money. Because I thought of you last night and felt compelled to help. I sat there, my hands shaking, tears falling uncontrollably. It wasn't just material help, but a clear answer to the question deep in my heart, is God real? From that moment on, I no longer just heard about God through someone else's words. I met him personally. That presence was not always loud or bright, but it was as sure and close as breathing. I realized that he was always with me. It was just that I had never opened my heart to recognize his footprints beside me. That event became a milestone in my faith. Whenever doubt or fear returned, I remembered that day to remind myself, if God was with me in my most desperate moment, he would be with me in every remaining journey. After experiencing God personally, I realized that I could no longer live the same way. The days of loneliness and despair had left a deep mark on me, but it was also that mark that helped me understand more clearly the pain of those who were lost. I knew that if I had been saved from the darkness, I could not keep that light for myself. I started to pay more attention to the people around me, my quiet co-workers, my neighbors who lived alone, or a friend I hadn't seen in a while. There were times when I would send them a text message to ask how they were doing, invite them out for coffee, or simply listen to their stories. At first, I worried that I would be awkward and not know what to say, but then I realized sometimes what people need is not advice, but just someone to sit by and not judge. One time I met a young person in a volunteer group whose face was always smiling, but whose eyes were empty. During a conversation, he suddenly shared that he felt useless and abandoned. My heart ached. I had been there. I told him my story, without embellishment or hiding the dark corners. When I got to the part where I prayed for the first time and received an answer, his eyes welled up with tears. He said, "If God can do it for you, He can do it for me." I began to realize that my calling was not necessarily a grand ministry or a distant mission. It was simply to be a supporter, to remind someone that they were not alone, that there was hope. Every text message, every conversation, every prayer for someone was part of that journey. Back then, I felt like I was a burden to others. Now I see that I can be a pillar, no matter how small. And looking back, I know that all the suffering I went through was not in vain. It was transformed by God into a tool for me to touch the hearts of those who are also walking through the darkness. Looking back on my journey, I still shudder when I remember the darkest days. At that time, I believed that I had no one to rely on, that abandonment was a lifelong sentence. But God stepped in, not loudly, not imposing, just gently knocking on the door of my heart right when it was about to break. The day I prayed for the first time, I had no idea that I was starting a new journey. It was just a trembling sentence. "God, if you are real, please don't leave me." And yet He answered, not by erasing all my problems, but by embracing my soul in the midst of the storm. I went from feeling forgotten by the whole world to realizing that my Creator cares for me with every breath. He not only healed me, but He placed me in His big arms, where I was loved, accepted, and called a child. Today, I am no longer just surviving from day to day. I live with purpose, with joy, and with a love that never ends. The scars are still there, but they are just a reminder of how amazing God has been in my life. If you are reading this and feel abandoned, I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me. You are not alone. There is someone who loves you more than you can imagine, ready to embrace you and heal your wounds. Open your heart, even just to a whisper. He is waiting for you. And if this story resonates with you, I invite you to continue walking with me, to seek, learn, and experience God's love together. Subscribe to this channel, not just to hear my story, but so we can walk together in the journey of finding the light. From the days of abandonment, when I thought there was no hope, I was found and embraced by God. He not only healed my wounds, but also gave me a new life, full of love, peace, and purpose. Now I live without fear of the darkness, because I know I belong to His light. If you too are feeling lonely, lost, or deeply wounded, know that there is someone waiting for you, ready to step in and change everything. With just a prayer, a small door opened, you will find Him right there. I invite you to join me on this journey, a journey of finding and experiencing God's love every day. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest sharing, stories, and encouragement. Together we will walk from being abandoned to being embraced and healed,